Ooh, hello. Is this thing on? Great. Okay. So it looks like Treasurer Swearengin is joining remotely. So I think we can get started. So we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order for the Pinole Finance Subcommittee. Let's see here. Okay, first item on the agenda was to call to order. Second would be public comment. So do we have any public comment for the committee?
No in-person public comments.
Okay, anything, no online?
Mayor, there are no public comments online.
Wonderful. Okay, so we'll move to item 3 for consent items to approve the minutes from January 14th, 2026.
So moved.
Okay, do we have a second? So we have a moved by Mayor Pro Tem Murphy, second by Treasurer Swearengin. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, looks like ayes have it. Do we need a roll call?
We can, if you would like, Mayor.
Sure. All right, why not? Roll call.
Okay. Mayor Taves,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Murphy,
Aye.
Treasurer Swearengin. Motion carries. Thank you.
Okay, moving on to item 4, business items. We'll go ahead and turn it over to Director Guillory for item A, fiscal year 26-27 financial policy review.
Members of the City Council, members of the public, and city staff. So we have a couple of items on the agenda tonight in preparation for the fiscal year 2026-27 budget development. The first here is the financial and investment policy review. And staff recommend that the Finance Subcommittee review the proposed fiscal year 2026-27 financial and investment policies and recommend them for City Council approval and provide other direction to staff. And other direction could include any proposed changes to any of the policies that we would incorporate before we present them to the City Council for approval. Next slide. Next slide, please. So to give some background on why we have this before you tonight, financial policies are an important part of prudent financial management of the city. And so we periodically review them, in our case, every year, to make sure that they are up to date and that we are in compliance with our financial policies. So they're intended to set guidelines on how the city will manage its financial resources and provide direction for financial decision-making. City policies align with standard financial policies recommended by professional associations, such as the Government Finance Officers Association, as well as the California Society of Municipal Finance Officers, and also those implemented by other local government agencies. Best practice is to establish financial policies and regularly review and update them as necessary. And I'd just like to note that the city is in compliance with its established financial and investment policies. Next slide. So the purpose of adopting financial policies, they institutionalize good financial management policies and procedures, clarify strategic intent for financial management, define boundaries on how we use our limited resources, support credit ratings in case we were to go out for any kind of debt financing, promote long-term and strategic planning, manage risks to financial condition, and comply with established public management best practices. So for the next few slides, I'm just going to go through each policy briefly. The full context of all policies are included as an attachment to the agenda report. So starting with the structurally balanced budget policy, it says that the city will aspire to create a proposed general fund operating budget that is structurally balanced, whereby current expenditures will be funded by current year's revenue, and that is to maintain structural balance within the budget. Next slide. So the next is our reserve policy, and it says the city will establish and maintain reserves to meet certain anticipated future obligations, as well as to ensure that the city maintains adequate financial resources to continue to provide basic municipal services in the event of a significant unanticipated revenue decrease or expenditure increase. And the city aims to maintain a reserve equal to 25% of general fund ongoing operating expenditures. It should be noted here that the City Council did adopt a revised reserve policy on June 17th, 2025, and that policy reduced the reserve level from 50% to 25% of general fund ongoing expenditures, and that provides about 3 months of expenditure coverage. Next slide. This is our revenue policy related to one-time or non-recurring resources. It says the city will strive to maintain a diversified and stable revenue base that is not overly dependent on any revenue type, land use, or major taxpayer. One-time resources, also referred to as non-recurring, should be used for one-time non-recurring expenditures, but not limited to establishing and rebuilding reserves, early retirement of debt, if that's a possibility, capital expenditures, and reducing unfunded pension liabilities. And we do use a portion of our unassigned fund balance, so that's available resources that is not assigned to specific uses for the items, some of the items that we have mentioned here in the policy. Next slide. Our revenue policy related to user fees says that the city of Pinole is empowered to recapture through fines up to the full cost of providing specific services. Regular and consistent review of all fees is necessary to ensure that the costs associated with delivery of individual services have been appropriately identified and that the city is fully recovering these costs. And as you are all aware, we currently have a citywide user fee study that is underway. And the first set of those updated fees were presented last night for the recreation programs. Next slide. This is our expenditure and budget policy, which says the city will deliver service in the most efficient and cost-effective manner. This includes utilizing the services of volunteers in areas where operationally and economically viable. The budget will state the objectives of the operating programs and identify the resources being provided to accomplish the specified objectives. And this is done in the form of our annual budget document. Next slide. The debt policy says that the city will limit the use of debt so as to not place a burden on the fiscal resources of the city and its taxpayers. I'm just going to skip down a few lines. The city will limit the total debt ratio, this is the debt guaranteed by the general fund, to 10% or as required by bond coverage ratios. And we are well within compliance of this policy. We only have one debt outstanding that is pledged against the general fund, and that's the 2006 pension obligation bonds. Those will be retired in the fiscal year 2035-36. And just also like to note that the bond covenant does not allow us to accelerate payments on those bonds. Next slide. The receivables policy says that the city will ensure the timely invoicing, monitoring, and collection of outstanding obligations owed to the city. And we do have procedures built into our processes to make sure that we are collecting our receivables in a timely manner. Next slide. This is our grants management policy and procedures. City departments actively pursue federal, state, and other grant opportunities when deemed appropriate. Grant funding allows the city to leverage local public funds by extending and enhancing the services it offers to the community and to introduce new initiatives. And we have also following that policy as we pursue grants and manage those grants. Next slide. Our capital assets policies and procedures says that purchased and donated assets meeting the city's capitalization definition and threshold will be classified and recorded in the city's financial records as capital assets. The value of the asset must meet the city's capitalization threshold of $5,000 to be recorded as a capital asset, and we do maintain a fixed asset system. Next slide. For unclaimed funds and outstanding checks, policies, and procedures, the City of Pinole will account for unclaimed funds in a manner which follows government code. Funds that remain unclaimed for at least 3 years will become the property of the City of Pinole after the procedures identified herein have been followed. Next slide. So the investment policy covers citywide investments on pooled cash. This is outside of the pension and OPEB funds that are invested, and we'll get to that policy next. The purpose of the investment policy is to define the parameters within which funds are to be managed. In methods, procedures, and practices, the policy formalizes the framework for the City of Pinole's investment activities and must be exercised to ensure effective and judicious fiscal and investment management of the city's funds. And we follow what is known as the slide method. In order of priority, safety is the most important, so we are safeguarding the funds that are invested by investing in less risky investments. And the next is liquidity, and that's how quickly investments can be converted to cash. And then lastly, yield. Next slide. Pension and other post-employment benefits, or OPEB, investment policy. The city has established the Employment Benefit Pension Plan, a Section 115 trust, and the goal of the plan's investment program is to provide a reasonable level of growth which will result in sufficient assets to offset a portion of the present and future obligations of retirement benefits provided by CalPERS and also those provided through the OPEB program for retirees who meet the eligibility requirements. Just a note here that there was an update to this policy. It was adopted by the City Council on September 16th, 2025. And the revised policy now includes other post-employment benefits sub-account, which was added to the Section 115 trust that was already established. And also want to note that the funds that were used to cover this were the $2.4 million that was transferred from the reduction of the general reserve from 50% to 25%. Next slide. So the next steps for this item would be to incorporate Finance Subcommittee recommendations, if you have any, and to present the policies to the City Council for approval. And that concludes my presentation on this item.
Okay, do we have any questions for Director Guillory?
No questions for me, Mayor.
Treasurer Swearengin? You
No
might
questions.
be on. No questions. Okay. Looking at the policy, one of the things that we talked about is this is for 1 year and 1 year only. How does the projection look for the second year? Or does the policy capture that?
Yes, so they're ongoing policies. We just revisit them just to make sure that we keep current on them.
Okay. So, it says, structurally balanced in the current year.
Oh, you mean okay. I
So,
thought you were speaking to the policies, all of the policies as a whole.
Yeah.
Or the structurally balanced budget policy.
Yeah, so when we do our budgeting, typically we do that for 1 year.
Yes.
My question is there ever been a consideration to do for 2?
To do a biannual budget, or
Right, for 2 years.
yes. So we could, and the policy will still apply. So it applies to each individual year.
Okay. Knowing that things would change, but it would be helpful to see like, okay, well, if this year we're budgeting, what does the second year included look like?
Okay. I see what you're saying.
Just as we're going through, 5-year projections for capital, it just seems to me that those are a little bit closer, or they're a little bit further out with a 1-year budget. And so as things change incrementally over year to year, you can get to that 5th year in a totally different situation than you had planned for in the 2 years.
Yes.
So I'm just asking if that was something that could be done, or has it ever been considered?
So can you, I'm sorry, I may not be
Sure.
following with
So,
the question.
so we plan a 5-year plan for capital,
Yes,
right? What I'm saying is every year we have a balanced budget that's just for that specific year. The projections that we had from I think we did a 20-year, 10-year, and 5-year based on, I think a couple years ago. The question is that during that 5-year plan, every year something has changed similar to last year. We had a revenue source and then OPEB and everything went up. What I'm asking is that we could try to anticipate a 2-year budget instead, meaning that whatever goals we had for this year and that money that we had could be spread out over a 2-year period to get a commitment for a 2-year.
we could if that's the direction
Okay.
that we're.
No, I'm just asking
giving.
if it's
Oh.
ever been considered.
Not since my time with
Okay.
the city, no.
Do you know of
I'm
any
aware of.
agencies that would do something like that?
Um,
I mean, is it possible?
it's possible some agencies do have
Okay.
2-year budgets.
Okay.
So yeah, some even have 3-year budgets. So agencies are. I think the common one is the annual budget, just because things change so quickly. And so, at my former agency, we tried going to a 2-year budget, and we ended up it almost doubled the work. We were still having the mid-year review at 6 months. We were still reviewing every 6 months, and so we ended up going back.
I see.
So it just depends on the circumstances, but with so much uncertainty, sometimes agencies will end up reverting back to annual just because you're still doing the same work.
Got it.
Yeah.
Understood. Okay. No, it was just a question I had
Yeah. No,
as I
good
was
question.
looking at this. I guess we'll talk about in the next item for budget planning
Yes.
some of the other questions that this kind of generated. So, okay, we'll take, I believe, do we have public comment?
No in-person public comments.
Okay. Anything online?
Yes, Mayor, we do have Raphael Menace online.
Great.
Hello, Mayor Pro Tem, Treasurer Swearingen. Name's Raphael Menace, resident of Pinole, at work right now, so I'm commenting in from online as I can. I have some questions about potential alterations to the investment policy and the pension fund policy. Is there a way we could set basically a benchmark for the level of risk we're willing to tolerate, like as a concrete number, like this much volatility year to year in the stocks we're investing in and so on? Because we've had increased volatility across several sectors driven by the AI boom. And I don't believe there's currently any language in either of those policies addressing whether AI companies are an acceptable investment or not, or indeed how you would define AI companies. NVIDIA certainly counts, but does Apple, does Google, Meta? So I think that it would be worthwhile, even given the shorter time horizons of our investments in the OPEB fund as they inevitably decline over the next 5 years, unless the city drastically alters how it's going to be approaching that fund. That, again, I think I brought this up last year. We want to think about what level of risk we're willing to tolerate in our investments. I know that we shifted from a moderate cautious to a moderate approach in the prior budget cycle. But I think that also this fundamentally links into a later agenda item, which I'll be commenting on when we get there, about how we're allocating our resources to deal with the inevitable expiry of the OPEB fund. But I just wanted to highlight concrete level of risk evaluations, having that as sort of a benchmark. Even if we don't have a year-to-year funds return benchmark, I think we can track volatility a bit more easily, and limitations on what industries the funds are investing in that are higher risk. I'd say AI, and again, though I know the council probably won't agree with me on this one, fossil fuels remain a relatively high risk industry, even given the recent policy make changes in the current federal administration. Thank you.
Mayor,
Okay.
there are no more public comments.
Okay, Director Guillory, do you want to comment? Any questions that could possibly be answered?
I think it was more of a suggestion, to make some updates. I would like to note that the city does not manage the investments directly for the Section 115 trust. We do, we contract with public agency services to assist us with that, and they manage that portfolio for us. And they manage it based on our direction, and we are using a moderate risk portfolio. That was one of the changes that was made. That does generate additional income as we try to extend the life of the Section 115 trust. And so, but at the same time, balancing risk with what we dictate we can tolerate for that trust. So I think we're okay there. And then as far as the other investments, we tend to invest in very low-risk investments like certificates of deposits. They're fairly safe. Money market accounts, for the most part. I know Apple was mentioned. That is one of our longer-term investments, and we've had that one for quite some time. I haven't invested in any other longer-term investments, such as companies that are involved in fossil fuels or some of the other things that was mentioned. And that's not in our policy, so I'm just mentioning that because that was one of the comments, but it is not prohibited by our policy. So just wanted to mention that.
Okay. All right, seeing there's no other public comment for item 4A, looks like we'll move on to 4B, budget planning.
Mayor, I think we have to make a motion for the recommendation.
That's
first.
correct, sorry about
And
it.
I'm happy to move the approval of the 2026-2027 financial policies and recommendation for the City Council.
Okay, I'll second that. We could do roll call vote.
Mayor Taves,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Murphy,
Aye.
Treasurer Swearingen.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you.
Okay, so Director Guillory, we'll move on to 4B, if you could take us through.
Okay. So as we continue with the meetings with the Finance Subcommittee in an effort to plan for the fiscal year 2026-27 budget, we continue with our budget planning process. For this item, city staff recommend that the Finance Subcommittee receive a report on staff identified anticipated opportunities and challenges for the fiscal year 2026-27 budget and preliminary general fund long-term financial forecast covering the years fiscal year 2026-27 through fiscal year 2045-46 and provide any direction to staff. Next slide. And next slide, please. So just looking at our budget cycle again, we're here in the planning phase. We will be moving to the formulation phase starting next week, where departments will start to enter their budgets. We have our internal budget kickoff meeting tomorrow morning. The purpose of this item is to provide the Finance Subcommittee with an early look at factors impacting the upcoming and future budgets, which is why we have some of the anticipated items identified, as well as including the preliminary long-term financial forecast, which will also help inform the budget process. Next slide. And next slide. So the anticipated opportunities and challenges, these were presented to the subcommittee at the first meeting that was held in January. And we went back and revisited, the management team went back and revisited all of the items and applied numbers for items where they are quantifiable. So we have some estimated revenues and savings, as well as estimated costs for those areas where we could calculate or estimate the amounts. Starting with the city manager and communications department, one of the opportunities here was to reduce the ongoing professional services expenses due to the transition of projects to internal staff, and that included reestablishing the internal information technology department. And so we were able to reduce the contract that we had with an outside firm for IT services by bringing a number of things in-house. Just the continuation of Media and Communications Fellowship Program, which is no cost to the city, increasing the use of digital communications to reduce this, results in a reduction to office supplies and mass mailing expenses. One of the main challenges in the city manager's department is that it is short-staffed. There is no dedicated administrative and supportive or strategic support available to assist the city manager or to assist departments citywide with overall general administration. And the cost for that position is approximately $156,000. That is one of the gaps in the city manager's office.
Director Giller or Mayor,
Yes.
do you want us to ask questions as we go, or do you want the presentation?
I don't know, a subcommittee, I think if it's a pretty lengthy,
We'll wait. Wait then.
well, I'm wondering, I'm writing down notes and maybe we could
We
try to
can,
compile.
I mean, it's a little more informal here, so if you want to stop.
Well, that's what I wanted to
Okay.
ask,
Okay.
because, I mean,
Yes.
rather than us pepper you with a bunch of questions at the end
Exactly.
and having to sift through this, would you be open to taking questions along the way?
Absolutely.
And then towards the end of this, try to summarize where we are. Right now, we're looking at, very granular issues. I'm thinking when we get to, okay, let's check in on the preliminary long-term financial forecast
Okay,
and then kind of cover the rest of this. That way we can ask questions in between.
okay.
Okay? All right. Yeah, Mayor Pro Tem, go ahead. You had a question?
Oh,
Yeah, I think, no. What I'm thinking is we ask along the way so that, but when we get to the long term, we pause,
through that.
try to see if we covered everything,
Okay.
and then move forward from there.
Yes.
Treasurer Swearengin, are you okay with that?
Sorry, I have my microphone off, so,
Yeah.
because I had a little cough, and I cough every time I want to cough into the speaker.
That's all right. We just want you to chime in if you have questions as we move along, okay?
Thank you.
All right.
And so, just to the question around, so my question was in regards to the city manager. First of all, I love seeing this. I don't remember seeing anticipated opportunities and challenges this way, at least detailed the last time I was on the committee. So this is great. I love this. I really, I love the line by line. The one question I had with regard to the estimated cost of $156,000 is that the assumption that that cost is the assistant to the city manager role? Is that what?
No.
Cost? Okay, what
So
is
it
that
would be
cost?
an analyst level. I should have mentioned that.
Okay.
So maybe a management analyst.
Is that the
would be-
current title we have?
Yes,
For that? Okay,
yeah.
so that 156 is the salary annually of the management analyst that we have not had that position filled.
Yes.
Gotcha.
Salary and benefits. Mm-hmm.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Okay. Right. So that was the city manager.
I was city manager.
Got it.
Okay.
All right.
Okay, so moving over to the Information Technology Department, which also falls under the city manager's office, hiring of the IT tech and the IT manager for expanded services, and also being able to do away with the contract. It also adds to a more centralized IT administration and oversight to assist with the various citywide IT needs. We have a software evaluation that is underway to identify consolidation and cost-saving opportunities over the next 5 years, and also continuing to explore grant opportunities in collaboration with other departments. You see the revenue estimates there. Some of the challenges in the department is increasing expenses for software subscriptions and equipment specifically, and that's kind of across the board. We're seeing increases in operating expenses. Process improvements needed citywide and require some software upgrades. Firewall replacements are needed, and also fiber evaluation and replacement is overdue and costly. Next slide. So Pinole Community Television, some of the opportunities includes increasing engagement and viewership, which can attract sponsors, and we received some of that information in Director Epps' presentation at last night's City Council meeting. We continue to explore public access legislative advocacy to expand cable definitions to include internet streaming, and continued revenue identification by way of memberships, fundraising, and grants. And we, along with that, continue to look for sponsorships. Some of the challenges are decreasing cable franchise and PEG, or public educational and government revenue. We're continuing to see a downward trend in that revenue. Reduced outside contracts for services for other agencies. The slow rebuilding of PCTV brand recognition, staff shortages, and then also working through a backlog of replacing outdated equipment. Next is the Community Development Department. Opportunities include expanded staffing capacity for rental programs. Good news for this one is it is cost neutral. The housing inspector would be 100% covered by the fees assessed for housing inspections. Short-term staffing support through the housing fellow, which is no cost to the city, and we continue to participate in that program. We have the citywide user fee study, which could lead to potential new revenue sources, as we have identified some additional fees that will be added to the schedule, in addition to increasing some of those fees that are already established. And then lastly, in-house plan check capacity and revenue retention. So could potentially do that by adding a position, a full-time position in-house, as opposed to contracting with an outside firm for plan check reviews. Next slide. So continuing with community development, some of the challenges identified are ongoing recruitment difficulties, specifically for the building inspector positions. We continue to use a contract inspector. It would be, or would save us money if we were able to have that position filled in-house. However, there's some recruitment challenges there. Implementation of the new rental inspection software and policies, so launching new software and updated policies for the rental inspection program will require significant staff time for setup, training, and outreach through the initial implementation period. Limited succession and advancement pathways for planning staff, which also makes it difficult to recruit for positions that become vacant in that area. Multi-year funding needs for the general plan, specific plan, and zoning ordinance updates. And you see that there is a pretty hefty cost there of approximately $2 million.
So I have a question.
Yes. I'll try to answer it.
Oh, 7 figures and start asking questions. So this $2 million is spread out, I mean, over time?
Yes,
When you
it
say
is.
multi-year, or is this $2 million per year?
Not per year, no.
Okay.
This would be over at least 3 years.
Okay. So looking at this, shouldn't it be like 600,000 and
Yes.
I mean, or
But we wanted to,
667,000 instead of 2 million?
if we're looking on an annual basis, yes. But we
Okay.
did want to show the full cost so that we understand what the magnitude of that would be, since it would carry over to future fiscal years.
Okay, so it's
But the rest of the estimates, sorry, Mayor.
yeah,
I was
yeah.
gonna say, just to clarify, the rest of the estimate and numbers are all annual
Annual,
numbers?
yes,
Okay.
they are. Yes.
Except for that one? Okay.
This is an exception.
So
Just one comment, Mr. Mayor, if I could.
please.
The specific plan could be done to update, that's the most important aspect, that's the one we look at the most, without doing the general plan. We do that on a we used to do it on a fairly frequent basis, but I don't think we've done it quite a while. And zoning ordinances, I think we do those as they come along anyway, do we not? Or am I missing something?
it's my understanding, I mean, just from my experience and discussing this over the years, is that I think we're long overdue for the general plan, and we've been supplementing by doing, I think we did the housing element, we did the safety element, but this looks to me like we're doing this over time. I don't know if Lily's available, but
Hello, Mr. Mayor. I am. Can you hear me okay?
maybe, yeah, I'm glad you're there. Maybe we
Okay,
could
wonderful.
explain this a little bit better than I can.
Of course, yes. So I'm anticipating that we will need a general plan update by 2030. Our general
Okay.
plan was adopted in 2010. So at 2030, that'll put it at 20 years, which is the furthest horizon that's recommended to go before a general plan update. The specific plan similarly was adopted at the same time and needs to be reevaluated to see what other opportunities there are for development to take account for the development that's already happened. And then the zoning ordinance also was adopted comprehensively in 2010. The treasurer is definitely correct that we do zoning ordinance updates on an as-needed basis as things come up. But it is really best practice when you update your general plan to then also update your zoning ordinance as there are just outdated land uses that have already occurred since 2010 and new land uses that we might want to consider. And then to talk about the timing aspect of this, anticipate that all of those, that we will be in another housing element cycle in about 2029. So that's the perfect time to fold in the housing element into the general plan. So we would be comprehensively updating all elements of the general plan with the exception of the safety element and then the health and environmental justice element, which were just adopted by council this year. And we would just make any needed changes to those elements for horizontal consistency among the elements. And then to address the timing aspect, I anticipate that this would take about 3 years to go through this process. And so getting ahead of it now and starting to put away some money in anticipation of that would be a great idea. One last piece when I have you here is I have submitted a request for information to all of our on-call planning contracts for a ballpark estimate of what this would cost. So we'll be getting those in by the end of this, actually in early March. So good timing for the budget. And so we can update this figure as those roll in to be more realistic with current market conditions.
Thank you for that. Mayor Swearengin,
The comment, Mr. Mayor, if you could, sorry, I don't have my hand up, but Lily Welling does.
Treasurer Swearengin, sorry.
Yeah. When we did this in 2010, it took way too long to do it. It did take, as the finance director said, it took about 2.5 to 3 years to complete it. And we kept getting spiked from the contractor that we had doing the general plan. And we finally got to the point and said, look, finish it. Every time we turn around, you're adding a change order to it. And we had a contract, we're going to keep it trying. So we got to be careful about that. I don't want the same contractor back again to do that because it costs us way more than it should have. That's the only comment I want to make. It does take 2.5 to 3 years. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And so I guess so 2029 sounds like it's far away, but it's not. It's 3 years from now. And 2030, we need to have, and I guess this is a question to Director Whalen. Is this something we are starting this year and working up to and delivered on 2030 or 2030? Or is this something that we need to have the money and start on 2029 and 2030? I guess
Good
when do we
question.
need to enter into contract and when do we actually need the $2 million that's being suggested here?
Good question. I anticipate that we would start entering into a contract in 2029 for work to begin, either that year, probably that year, and then into 2030 and into 2031.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. ready?
Right, yeah.
Continue? Okay. So continuing with community development, the last challenge that we have listed here is economic development priorities are constrained by lack of dedicated staffing. We have an allocation of $80,000 that we budget each year for economic development initiatives, but it's been a challenge to move those forward just due to not having a dedicated staff person for that.
Can I just ask a quick question about that, since we do have Director Whalen here? In terms of the economic development priorities, I'm sure those are coming from our economic development strategy and plan. I can't remember the last time we received an update on that, but I'm wondering, when I see the 80,000, I think a lot about some of the, I know Director Whalen participates as well on the East Bay Economic Development Alliance, and I know that there's a lot of perhaps like traditional chambers or alliances like that that are actually doing a lot of support for counties and cities like ours. So when we say part-time, limited-term employee, is that including a firm that will be essentially checking off our economic development strategy list, or are we thinking about one person? I see employee, and of course I think one person, but I just want to be clear about if the council decided or the committee decided to move this recommendation forward, I think there is especially given our budget review yesterday, I think there's value to assessing some of those particular opportunities, i.e. the TOT, for example, which could probably give us more than 80,000 annually if we found the right partners. But I'm just wondering again, like, are we seeing that employee as really a firm, or are we seeing it as one person?
Director Whalen?
Great. Yeah, I'm here. Yeah, great question again. So I'm seeing it as one person. We did work with a firm to advance some of the economic development strategy actions right after we adopted the strategy. However, it was there's, because of the high costs that come with contracting out for that service, we're not getting as much bang for our buck.
Gotcha.
As actually bringing in someone who could fill that role on a part-time basis. What we really need is a person in Pinole to do this work. Work in City Hall and then out in the community.
Gotcha. Okay. So this is a larger question, not directed to you, Director William, but it is when I'm seeing, so one of the themes that comes up every budget cycle that I still, that I am supportive of theoretically, but I would love an answer to this, is that I oftentimes see directors and staff reference savings as bringing folks in-house. Right, so we've talked about the IT. We're talking about. There's different departments who have brought traditional consultants in-house, and so that workload has been brought in-house. But in my head, that clashes with. That has clashed with the cost, the estimated cost of bringing those folks in-house and also paying them pensions. And there's so many different things that we pay for. So theoretically. And in practice, I have been supportive of bringing those things in-house because I think it does better for our staff morale to have people who are working in City of Pinole, i.e. they're not working remotely, but also working within the City of Pinole, but also when they have time work remotely. But they're also, it means that they're probably creatively developing other ideas while they're working on their work as well with the departments. But one of the tensions I see that I would love an answer to at some point is, how do we, where should I be looking in the budget to assess the real savings that we have by bringing these folks in-house versus the cost of bringing them in-house and their worthiness of having those additional benefits? Does that make sense, Director Guillory?
No, it does. And I think that's been our approach when we're looking at this. So, using the fundamental cost benefit analysis when we're looking at that, right?
Okay.
So when we're costing out, we're looking at all costs when we're looking at, in-house versus contracting.
Yeah.
So we're considering those long-term impacts like pensions, potentially OPEB. We're including those in the costs.
Okay.
General overhead that are associated with that new position, right? We have to people have to be here and have to have the tools they need to do their jobs as well. So we're looking at the full picture when we look at that.
Okay.
And we're measuring it against what we're spending when it comes to contractors. And we have a lot more control in-house as well for what's being done. I think also it enhances our services as well. For example, I'm just going to use the newly or reestablished information technology department and the support that they've been able to give to the police department, for example, by just being within the city and really having a really good having good knowledge about the city's internal processes and being able to be more effective in that way, being more responsive to staff needs. And again, especially in the public safety area where there were some gaps when we didn't have that. So we're considering all of that. We're considering the quantitative impacts, but also the qualitative impacts.
Okay. I don't know how that can be said more during the budget cycle, but
Okay.
I would love for that, especially when this budget comes back to council. I just hear it so much in the community, and I think, again, most of us as council members really want to build an agency where we are investing in our staff in-house, right? I mean, the historical idea of city government is that people make the city government, and people who work in the city hall are doing the work.
Yeah.
But I oftentimes have problems communicating with residents around the long-term savings versus the short-term savings, the long-term cost versus the short-term cost of bringing folks in-house. But I think theoretically and philosophically, I think most people, including residents, are supportive of bringing folks who are consultants in-house to do work, especially with new divisions, I should say, with IT, for example. That one's a challenging one because I think there's so much that's changing with IT, not that every department is not changing. That one, I feel like we've worked with a particular vendor. We've been able to bring folks from that vendor actually in-house, and so we benefit in many ways there.
Yes.
So that's I think that's more recent too. That's something we've done more recently. So I think that's a great opportunity to really express that in a long-term savings approach versus, and it goes back to what you said, Mayor, about like the 1 to 2 years. Like I'm seeing this and I'm like, of course, like I would love to move these things forward, but I just want us to communicate that a little bit better if we can.
In that same vein, it's kind of, I mean, I look at it and I think, and as a council member, I think, and just as the public, they'll see, hey, we're going to save $127,000, but that might not be like today, right? That might not be it. That might be something that's happening 6 months from now. But I have to be honest, in a council member's mind, I'm like, wow, we have $127,000 to do something over here with the community, or we have $127,000 to do something else, right? Or at the end of the year, hey, we're magically just balanced, right? And it's kind of, well, where did all that savings go? And similar to last night's conversation was, how do we show that?
Yeah.
I mean, we completely understand that might be the case, but I think it's hard when you're hearing, well, OPEB costs went up. Well, how much? Did it, just understanding those big ticket items that come in that change things. And a lot of times when I see, $16,000 or $116,000 and 0 cents, I know that's an estimate, right? And that's sometimes when you see 2 million, similar to what Director Whalen, if she hadn't said, hey, this is an estimate, everybody would be thinking in their mind that it's exactly $2 million that we're going to need. And it might be 2.5, and $500,000 is a considerable amount of money. That means that some program doesn't get funded, right? And so I think magnitude for me is something that we can try to communicate if we're estimating, but at the same time, knowing it over time, knowing the spend over time, which kind of leads me to, have we explored a spend down curve or an S curve?
Okay.
Just so that we can see how much, and one thing that struck me every single time we've had our budget discussions, Director Guillory, it's been always one of these things in my mind, the seasonality of funding. So when we ask for something, there is a season to ask for it, so that gives staff enough time to build on that. I've tried to catch those seasons with previous city managers, but as a council, it might be important to to figure out when those seasons are coming. So, for example, you mentioned that property tax might be low, but it might come in at a different time. So our numbers that we're looking at are actually plus a certain amount of money or negative a certain amount of money, and just kind of understanding that graphically for me might be helpful. I keep going back to the taxes when you showed the dollar. That was perfect because I'm able to communicate that directly to our citizens and say, hey, everyone, you think all of your taxes are coming to the city of Pinole and are expecting all these services, when the reality is it's only a fraction of that. And maybe as a city, we have to have a larger discussion, right, about how we're being taxed and where that money's going. So I think that those graphics, and I know it's not easy to synthesize and consolidate this stuff down, but if there was a way, I think that would be extremely helpful for us as a council, and future councils, and then as a community at large too.
Okay.
So I think just the S curve, understanding our spend, understanding, I think, how these outside factors affect our budget, and what that does to our plans. Because really, I mean, it feels like every budget cycle we're replanning, right? So maybe it's something that we could show and then have a discussion with the council, if that's possible.
Okay.
Oops, sorry about that.
Oh, that's okay. So thank you for that. That's very helpful feedback. That's always a question in my mind, is what is the information that folks need? What do they, because I have lots of numbers if you want those, but communicating those effectively so that people understand the financial
And I think
story.
you're doing great. I mean, you're doing a great job. I think this table just showing, as mentioned, revenue and estimated costs, but I think that it's like, how do we capture that in a snapshot
Yes.
for the community? And you've done it in the past, but I know that it's the road to that is not easy. I do want to say that there are asks that, well, let's get through the rest of the
Okay.
presentation. Maybe I could save the rest of my questions.
Okay, we just have a
to the
few
end.
more departments
Yeah.
to get through. Okay, so going over to community services. So next slide, please. Opportunities there include cost sharing and partnerships.
Mr. Mayor, I don't mean to interrupt, but I had some comments on
Okay.
economic development,
Yeah, please go ahead.
if I could. And what I'm seeing in the revenue growth and long-term sustainability, if you look at the numbers, you realize that property taxes don't come anywhere as close to sales taxes. And we have put in a great amount of housing in the last 2 years. And what that has done is it's increased the traffic patterns. It's created more need for police and fire services and public works services, more use of the roadways. We don't have enough public transportation to cover people who would already use public transportation or to get them to where they want to go. The things that I see is that we should be focusing, as this statement says, business attraction and retention efforts, because it's critical to the balance of any budget in this city, that from now on for the next 10 years, that we look at where the most taxes are available, and they are definitely in sales tax. I do believe that an economic development director would be good for the city. I think that person could definitely look at available properties and also go out and find potential businesses to move into this community. They're out there, and Pinole's not a bad place to move because it's easy to reach from all the cities around it and close to the freeway, right on the freeway. So I would recommend that we definitely look into the cost of an in-house economic director, because I think it would pay for itself in a fairly short period of time. Thank you.
Thank you for the comments. Oh,
Okay. Next slide, please. So moving over to the Community Services Department. So opportunities noted includes cost sharing and partnerships, some collaborations with local organizations and businesses and other city departments to help reduce costs through shared resources. and also pursuing donations and sponsorships, and possibly to the tune of $170,000. You may recall that we did receive a donation from the soccer league to help with some upgrades at the soccer field, and that was $167,000. So continuing to look for those types of opportunities and working with partners on that. Program evaluation and adjustments is another one. So the department has reviewed program performance and made strategic adjustments to fee schedules and offerings to improve cost recovery while maintaining accessibility for the community to various programs. And with the new fee study, estimated to increase revenues by $55,000. Increased community engagement and strong participation in events and programs continues as an opportunity to engage with the community. Operational efficiencies, so the department is reviewing process improvements, better scheduling, and cross-department coordination to help maximize staff time, reduce duplication of effort, and improve overall budget efficiency. Next slide. Some of the challenges in the department includes rising operational costs, and again, that's across the city. Deferred maintenance and capital needs, and that also aligns with some of the backlog of capital improvement projects citywide as well. And then program cost recovery limitations. So there are a number of programs in the community services offer that are not fully recoverable, and it does rely on a subsidy from the general fund. Next slide. So for the Human Resources Department, an opportunity includes a proposed joint supervisor academy. So again, working with partners regionally for this academy. Discussions with neighboring West Contra Costa County cities confirmed that this need is shared regionally, with many agencies facing similar challenges related to limited training budgets, staff capacity, and access to public sector specific supervisory training. If the city were to host this academy, it would cost between $30,000 and $40,000. However, we would generate between $24,000 and $32,000 in revenue for a net cost of about $6,000 to $8,000 as a cost share. One of the challenges is the need for enhanced professional development for lead and frontline supervisory staff, and that could be improved possibly with the supervisory training. Next slide. Going over to the police department.
Can I ask a quick question? Sure. So with the training I know that we typically will have the insurance company that provides training for agencies. Have we looked into any of those, or is that what's currently supporting the training in the city? So I know ASKIP.
We're just seeing if Director Shale is
Right.
available.
Like it's called ASKIP.
Okay.
There's several insurance agencies that are out there. I know ASKIP, and then there's Keenan and Associates for schools, but they offer training as part of the insurance program.
Okay.
I'm just wondering if those
Hello,
have been
good
introduced.
evening. I'm here. Could you go ahead and repeat the question?
So I was wondering, does our insurance company offer, like, how is the current training being supported now? And does the insurance company that we have offer any of those workplace trainings, supervisor trainings, et cetera?
We do. We have a number of online trainings that are available through MPA, Municipal Polling Authority.
Uh-huh.
And so we are able to utilize those online trainings for our staff. And then we also have a separate citywide budget that is also allocated for specific mandated trainings as well.
Great. Okay, so this would be to on top of those trainings for the supervisory staff and employee staff?
Yes, this would be specifically targeting our lead personnel, also staff and entry-level managers, to provide them with some professional development.
Got it.
But specifically targeted more as like an academy, where we would identify a number of individuals to go through a approximately 6-month academy.
Okay.
To develop some of their professional skills.
Great. Okay. Thank you.
So the way I'm reading this is that the challenge is the challenge listed here is mixed into the opportunity. Those are not two different issues, if that makes sense. I mean, we're talking about a supervisor academy, but the challenge list here, that there's an enhanced professional development, there's a need for enhanced professional development. So if we were to, fund the opportunity, the challenge is
Yeah, they're,
still a challenge, but we're addressing the challenge through
yes.
that. Okay, perfect.
They're related.
At first, I saw it as two different costs or two
Yeah,
different.
because there's some other items, in addition to the supervisory, there's, employment and there's other items, but yes, this folds into that
okay.
opportunity, yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions before we move on?
No.
Okay. Moving on to the police department. So opportunities here, the department was recently awarded several grants. The Office of Traffic Safety Grant, the Cannabis Grant, and the Burn Crisis Intervention Program Grant. Staff will continue to seek grant opportunities, and we are working on those efforts citywide, and that includes reapplying for the grants where we have the ability to do so, and also looking for some specific grants which are listed here, including the Terrorism Prevention Grant, Homeland Security Grants, and others. Staff will allocate funds from the National Opioid Settlement Funding to purchase a detection canine and a vehicle, so we have those funding sources available. Challenges for the police department includes maintaining the police department fleet. That is a major challenge at this time. So we are looking at considering a leasing program for full or partial replacement of the fleet, and the cost will depend on the number of vehicles in the program. But can get up to $280,000 in the fifth year of a 7-year program for the full fleet. So currently, the practice is that we are replacing police vehicles on a pay-as-you-go basis or as needed. So it's either through sources we have special revenues that the police department receives, such as the Public Safety Augmentation Fund. We have limited resources in the city's equipment replacement fund, and then if a vehicle is damaged and we receive recovery from the insurance company, we're relying on that to replace the vehicle.
So I mean, we've talked about this, and I know, Chief, we've talked about it too. I think, like, when we see the challenges where we say future replacement can get pushed, that this is the kind of mentality that gets us in a $315,000 problem, right? Versus $157,000 problem twice, right? Like, I mean, 100, if we paid that much and then that much. But even further, if we did like a 9-year program, and I don't know if these radios all have to be bought at once, but my point is the same thing with the fleet. Like, I'm perfectly okay funding a replacement program for anything that you guys have. Mm-hmm. I just want to make sure that it's over the cost and cycle of the life of the item. And it feels like we keep getting hit with the budget item of $315,000 or these type of funding where it's like, well, we'll just pay for the replacement. That's kind of why I brought up the leasing model before, is that maybe that might work for us. Not saying it's a solution, but we have to change the framework, because the worst thing we can do is buy 45 radios, because they're going to fail the same way right about all the same time in kicking the can down to a future council. So how is the department wrapping their arms around all of this and then, incrementally replacing these items, if at all possible? Because I know if there's a technology change, 4G to 5G, that's a huge jump. That's a one-time cost. But how are you taking that? And I guess this goes for all departments. How are we doing that as a whole?
Well, and I can definitely speak to the items on this list. With regard to the radios, these are the portable radios that you see our officers carrying, and they run roughly $8,000 to $9,000 a piece. Our current radios that we have are working. They can no longer be serviced. So if something happens to a radio, then we will have to replace it. So that cost estimate is if all of our portable radios went down right now, that is what the cost would be to replace it, which is very significant. So once we learn that they can no longer be serviced, that's where we want to start exploring options, just like what you're saying, a replacement program for these where we're not replacing everything at once, where the whole group of radios will then become a problem, in years down the road, but to actually come up with a plan. And that can certainly be adjusted over a period of time, that knowing if it is a priority for council, that we can adjust what that replacement rate would be over a period of time. And that way we would make sure that we have replacement radios in hand. So if a couple go down or a few go down over the course of the year, that we have something to supplement them without having to search outside of the budget for that money. Similarly, with the vehicles, we have explored leasing options that go anywhere from a 3-year plan to replace all of the vehicles in our fleet to a 7-year plan to replace all the vehicles in the fleet. This $280,000 is roughly for a 5-year plan. So the 5th year becomes the most expensive because now we've replaced all of the vehicles in the fleet. But then after the 5th year, those vehicles are sold and the cost of selling those vehicles gets rolled back into the program. So that is the highest amount that we have. But it would certainly help us to have that kind of a program, because all it takes is to have 1 or 2 vehicles involved in a collision, and now we are paying out of pocket to replace those vehicles, which are very expensive for the vehicle and the upfitting and all of that. So that is definitely we can tailor that number up to 280,000 and lower.
So it sounds like you guys are already like the vest, all the equipment that goes into, and then having that replacement program.
The firearms are a little bit different of a situation, because when we transition platforms for a firearm, it also requires training for the officers. We want to make sure that officers are carrying compatible firearms. So if there was an emergency situation where more ammunition was needed, we want to make sure that some officers aren't carrying one type and an older type, and others have the newer version. There are really no grant opportunities for firearms. Most weapons systems and weapons accessories are not projects that we can seek grant funding for. But that is a cost that's a necessary safety equipment item for the police department, and we're just getting to a point where that needs to be replaced. So that item is an all or nothing cost.
But the 93,000 for the cameras, is that something that's also on a replacement program? I mean, we know that they're about 5 to 7 years and you need to replace them.
Yes, that is an adjustable cost as well.
Okay. So there's a potential for us to commit to a plan. It's a lot lower than what we're paying for this fiscal year if we were to spread it over a 5-year period. Wondering, we said $5,000 for capital assets. Is it possible to capitalize any of these? Or are they already capitalized assets and in the plan for replacement?
The portable radios are certainly capital assets because they are over that threshold. And same with our vehicles as well. The other items, the cameras is the major cost of the cameras is more of the subscription cost than the actual hardware cost. So that probably is not a capital asset.
You guys are going to hate me, but I'm going to go back to our policy and see if there was the $5,000 or critical safety equipment. Might be a consideration in there because
It's just $5,000.
I know,
Yeah.
I know. I'm kind of thinking to myself, like, should we include some of these items, like vehicles that are just, we're always going to need a truck to drive, service crews around, right? Like, or, I mean, that would be something that's over $5,000. But if there's a critical tool that we know they need in order to perform that task, and could that criticality be assessed and then brought to council? Because I'm pretty sure this is across all departments. Like there's, for example, HR, the training mechanism, I don't think a council is going to say, oh, no, don't train, you know what I mean? Like, or no, don't train staff, right? I mean, I know that there's a budget cut that we can make, but still, if it was capitalized, then we know that that's something that we're going to be doing in perpetuity. I'm just asking if, maybe that's a consideration for council at a later date, but to say something to the effect of a criticality that's to certain equipment, if possible, I don't know.
Mayor Tave, are you, just to make sure I'm understanding your point, are you, when you say capitalized, you mean that we're setting aside funds for replacement over time to build up those funds, right? Because when, in our policy, capitalized just refers to an accounting mechanism, right? We're including it in our accounting as a fixed asset and capitalizing that way. But we're not automatically setting aside funds to replace.
Well, and that's kind of what I'm asking is,
Yes.
is that for a camera might be $3,000 and not hit the $5,000 mark,
Right.
But having that plan of replacement would require X amount of money per year in the budgeting sequence.
I see.
That would carry over from year to year, knowing that, okay, if there was, in the event we had to make cuts, like, hey, this is the line that you can't cut past, right?
Yeah.
And understanding where that line is, and then maybe having to reestablish what's below that line.
Yeah.
So it was just a thought that I had as far as policy goes, is there a way to incorporate some of these critical items that we know we're gonna need anyway, right? And what are those items? What are those items that we would need?
Okay.
Yeah. Sorry to interrupt, but
No, that's
just kind
okay.
of struck me as
Sounds
like,
good.
well, wait a minute, is there a way to cut these costs in half at a minimum or over time?
Okay, so thank you, Chief, for addressing those. We'll go ahead and move to the next or last department, which is Public Works. So opportunities identified includes accessibility to free and low-cost training opportunities, not only for enhancing technical knowledge, but also for enhancing skills. And this is for the internal Public Works team. Tapping into available smart city technologies and collaborating with neighboring cities and regional and state agencies to capitalize on some of those opportunities. Fostering partnerships with teams of public agencies, utility companies, community groups, and private businesses. Engaging with the community in an equitable and respectful manner and with full transparency for the work that Public Works is doing. Extensive availability of information under the various areas of Public Works and publicizing that information. Showing progress on the sustainability and resilience initiatives as well. Next slide. So looking at the challenges, one includes staffing shortages in several areas, and the following positions will allow staff to perform work in-house and reduce the cost of retaining consultants. The first position is the environmental coordinator / project manager, a full-time position. That could assist the city in avoiding potential penalties associated with water quality requirements and stormwater system reporting. Next slide. A full-time maintenance worker specializing in concrete and masonry work. This could be funded by the Street Improvements Fund due to the focus on minor sidewalk repairs and curb ramp replacement. And a part-time maintenance aide for trash and debris collection. This would be funded by the elimination of the $13,000 to $15,000 seasonal contract for debris removal and having a dedicated part-time staff person in-house to cover that area. Ongoing challenges include limited staffing resources to better meet the community's needs, and also some challenges in some current recruitments in the engineering area, specifically the CIP manager and the associate engineer positions. Aging infrastructure and funding limitations, especially in the areas of road rehabilitation, facilities upgrades, and procurement for needed equipment continue to be challenges. Next slide. There's a need for improved asset management, preferably using GIS layering, and locating and organizing records and as-built plans. The need for additional equipment, tools, and technological upgrades, and the need for emergency preparedness and response protocol, hierarchy of communications within the city, organized response units within the various departments to support the community in the case of an emergency. And that concludes this portion of the presentation.
I just had two quick questions. So as I'm looking at the departments, one of the conversations the council has been around shared use or shared service agreements.
Yes.
And I'm wondering, particularly with our police and public works departments, have those opportunities been considered in this outlay here, wherever that might be? We've been pretty general as a city council around like our support for where it would be, leaving it mostly to department heads to kind of consider. I obviously know a number of us, particularly in this department, are new, so I'm just wondering, have considerations been explored around shared use or shared service agreements between those two departments as an opportunity for cost savings or shared savings even, or shared costs, excuse me?
I can speak to that a bit when we were talking about communications and IT. That's been a big one that we are currently assessing. All of the software contracts that we have for that overlap to see if each department was, having different software programs to meet their needs, but the IT and communications department is looking at those across the entire city to see, is there redundancy? Can we combine those service agreements? So that is one particular way that we are working on that right now. I don't know.
So Chief, just so I'm clear, that one is more of an internal department shared use, kind of similar to how we have a fund for what is that fund called where we share?
Interdepartmental.
Thank you. Fund, is it called fund?
Charges.
Charges fund, thank you. But are there agency considerations between agencies? So let's just use Hercules as an example. And I think, and particularly I think about this fleet a lot because the leasing program is something we've discussed in the past as a council for sure. I also don't know how many times in the last decades or even 2 decades, like, 2 police cars have run into each other or had a situation. I don't know. I'm not saying that hasn't happened. I actually don't know. If that were to happen, I obviously would want our officers to have an easy selection to move forward, but I'm imagining that has not happened. And if it has not happened in Hercules, what would be the cost or what would be the savings opportunities there to partner together? Just do fleets work like that? Like where you can share share the cost of fleets between the two types of vehicles that Hercules has and Pinole has, and I mean we do it so well with wastewater. I'm just thinking, is that an opportunity that we've explored here?
As far as I am aware, we have not explored that as an option. Fleet is especially challenging because of the amount of use each of the vehicles has, and then the wear and tear of the patrol use of a vehicle with the vehicle running for so many hours is much different than a private person's use of their particular vehicle. So we have to, even amongst our agency, we have to be very careful about not running our vehicles 24 hours a day if possible. So even sharing between our staff, there needs to be a rest period for the vehicle so that the day shift officer isn't driving the same vehicle as the graveyard shift officer. So that could potentially be a challenge with vehicles in particular, looking at agreements between agencies. Okay. From a law enforcement standpoint, we have a lot of mutual aid agreements. And so that for service delivery, like we definitely have mutual aid agreements with not only our local agencies, but throughout the state if needed.
Okay. And I think something that comes up in the community to me often is, to what extent are we paying for our safety, right? Of course, I would say, and I feel that everyone in Pinole wants to feel safe and wants to be safe. And we've had this conversation primarily amongst our military policy when it comes to what type of purchases we're having. Like, to what extent are we going to spend what, right? And we've had those conversations annually, of course, because of state law. Prior to that, I don't think we were having those conversations. And so I'm just wondering, the reason why I think the shared service use is important is because what I do know is that our police department has done so well at like coordinating, as you mentioned, mutual aid conversations and moving those conversations along. I just wonder, what are going to be our limits? Like, what is that good limit between, okay, cool, we're going to fund everything that, that folks ask for, and then, things sit down in a back room and then they collect us and they collect tenure, right? Because they're not being used really in Pinole right now. Though we also don't want the situation where we don't have anything, and then we need that. So again, it goes back to long-term financial planning, and I'm not sure yet that we have done that within the departments, but I do see that there are needs across at least five different cities in West County that are very similar, particularly with our public works and police departments. So I just wanted to mention that as well, just to elevate that conversation. I knew, obviously, Chief, you come on board in this last year, and we also had our public works director in this last year. I just want to re-up some of those conversations that the council has really had around, we want to find opportunities for shared use or shared service, and particularly opportunities that might save money when they do. If they don't, I think cost recovery is great, but when we can do some savings, that would be great. Director, I'm sorry, I didn't.
I was just going to add small pieces of information. It's a great point, and there is potential for greater collaboration between the departments to save on funding. Public Works maintains the city fleet, but as our chief mentioned, our usage is different. Within Public Works, we share some of the vehicles between the wastewater and maintenance operations. So there are also collaborations within the individual departments. And just recently, in the OTS grant application, for example, we worked together to apply for traffic safety education with funding for staffing from both departments, PD and Public Works. Similarly, the Crossroads software was enough licenses for PD and Public Works. So, and I know these are small examples. There is potential for more of future collaborations to save the city, but we're starting to work on it.
Okay. Yeah, and this is actually great. I mean, I don't think those are small at all. I think those are things that we weren't doing and we're doing now. I am interested in the interdepartment within the agency and also outside of the agency. And I wanted to, again, re-up that conversation because I think the council has discussed this before. And I just wanted to make sure that the directors knew that that's opportunity, that I would say, and I've seen the council support in the past, and if there's opportunities to do that, I think that'd be great. Yeah.
Yeah, the conversation that I remember was the bucket truck, when we were purchasing the bucket truck. And then we were having the discussion, well, how many times do we go to Hercules in need of use of the bucket truck? And I believe where we landed was that, hey, they help us, we help them, and we talked about MOUs as to how that would be connected. The question becomes, is, as that's happening, is there a cost share plan or cost share model for that bucket truck's maintenance, for that, so that the reliability is there? After hour calls and a tree falls or something like that. I think those are things that we can discuss. And I mean, there's only so many ways a tree's going to fail, right? And it's only so many equipment that you're going to need. So those plans could start to come together, and then having the discussion of, well, what do we need to do that? And it doesn't make sense for our city to have, the Bearcat, and we're paying for all of it, when in reality, if something were to happen, how does having that asset not only benefit us, but it costs money to maintain it. And how is that and it's borne on the city of Pinole at this point. I'm using that as an example because that's something that sits there and is going to continue to sit there, but worries everyone if we actually needed it, right? And so it's one of those things where we're bearing that cost, but it's really a regional asset. And I know that there are other regional assets that are pretty much not coming before, like as public, right? But what does that mean if they have a particular piece of equipment that we would need? And so just really having those honest conversations, if there's any interest at all, and if there isn't, how many times are we going to be helping, right, with no help back, right? And how much of that happens. So this is a question because it is labor hours on our team, and there is a cost that we're taking on.
That there is definitely more potential in that area as well. We have been, although not frequent, we have been sharing resources, but it needs to be formalized more. Also for the protection from liabilities.
Yeah, there's an insurance issue, right? If
Yes.
somebody gets hurt, I think that's another element. I'm glad that you're thinking along those lines. I just think that we need to figure out how do we formalize that mutual aid, and is it something that can be used on a day-to-day basis? And also, if we're receiving more benefit than Hercules, it's important for us to be fair, right? And where that settles up. Okay, well, no, I'm glad you brought that up, Mayor Pro Tem, because that is something that I think may be fruitful. Those discussions might be fruitful for the teams. So
Where they matter, yeah. And the only other question I had, it's not missed upon me, around the fire department. I know I just want to understand, Director Gillier, how is that, because we have a contract for service, which I think has a 5-year end.
Yes,
Okay. What is that 5-year? What is the end year?
we have 2 years left.
2 years. So 2020. What year are we?
28, 29,
2028. Gotcha. So March of January 1st of 2028 is.
No, it would be 6/30, so June 30 of 2029, I believe.
Gotcha.
So then we have 3 years left.
Okay.
Yeah.
So right now we receive revenue for that contract, and then we pay out that quarterly. Is that correct? Or how do we?
No, it's
Okay,
just
how does-
offset in our costs. So
Okay.
the county, it goes directly to ComFire from the county.
Okay.
And that in turn reduces what we pay
So-
ComFire.
So our staff is not invoicing or paying invoices, or like, how does that work?
They're
in
invoicing
operation?
us for the net amount.
Okay.
So the total costs are just say approximately $8 million. We get about $2 million from Measure X through
Okay.
the county, and we pay on a monthly basis. That $6 million is broken up over 12 periods.
Okay, for sure. Okay. Let's just include the date, maybe when the presentation comes back,
okay.
just so we're just
Yes.
always, I know
Yep.
we've had some turnover in staff, and
Yep.
of course, council turns over, so just making sure we have those dates. It's not missed upon me that that's a 5-year contract, and we probably should start negotiating the next 5 years. So thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Okay.
okay,
Thank
and
you.
these items are all. I mean, there's no summary to in the presentation of like what the net benefit and net cost would be.
There is not, just because there are some numbers that are not there as well, but for what we do have, we can
Okay.
show what the total cost would be, and then also show what are the general fund impacts, because there could be some non-general fund impacts as well. So showing that breakdown will probably
Okay.
be helpful.
Great.
Yeah.
All right.
So we'll continue to work through that. And I'll talk about that in just a moment in terms of holding a special meeting for the departments to present their budgets, and we can come back with this information at that time too.
That'd be great.
Yeah, so we'll get to that in just a moment. So ready to move on?
Yeah, please.
Okay, so for this section, we'll go through the preliminary long-term financial forecast. So the forecast is a planning tool that we use that is intended to highlight emerging challenges and opportunities so that the city can proactively address them through the budget development process and plan for future years. So some of the budget pressures that we are facing going into the fiscal year 2026-27 budget cycle, there are a few things here. So the general fund revenues are projected to increase 2.7%, or $859,000, while expenditures are projected to increase 5%, or approximately $1.6 million. resulting in a projected deficit or shortfall at this point of about $718,000, and you'll see that in the financial forecast. Some of the factors that are contributing to that includes our major tax revenues, specifically property tax and sales tax, are projected to increase by 3% and 2% respectively. So our expenditure growth is continuing to outpace our revenue growth. Pension and other post-employment benefits projected to increase 9%. And our professional services projected to increase 5%, and that's primarily due to increases in our contract service agreements. So one area to highlight is that our fire services agreement, the expenditures are increasing by $7.8 million, and our contribution from the county's Measure X funds, it's only growing by $1.1 million for this upcoming fiscal year. So that's one of the challenges we're facing as well. Our pension and OPEB trust is expected to be fully exhausted by fiscal year 2030-31, and the deficit is projected to grow to $5.6 million by then if we were to make no changes between now and that time. Some of our budget highlights. Our voters passed Measure I, which enabled the city to maintain service and staffing levels as they are currently. The city continues to maintain a separate general reserve that is equal to 25% of ongoing general fund operating expenditures, or 3 months of coverage. The city also established an OPEB trust and funded it with the $2.4 million by reducing the general reserve from 50% to 25%. So that will help to offset some of our annual OPEB costs. Looking at the key revenue assumptions. Next slide, please. Looking at our key revenue assumptions that went into this forecast, we have a number of sources that we use to build the long-term forecast, including projections that are provided by our expert consultants, HDL. They assist us with projecting sales tax as well as our property tax. For utility users tax, franchise tax, and other taxes such as business license and transient occupancy tax, we use historical trends, and we also consider the current economy with relation to those areas. For our intergovernmental taxes, or the vehicle in lieu fee, that is based on projections also provided by HDL. And for grants, we used figures based on our current awards, so we didn't assume any new grants in the forecast. Next slide. Continuing with revenue assumptions for permits and fees, it's based on historical trends. We also anticipate updates from the new fee study and factor those in. For public safety charges, it's based on the Tri-Cities contract that we have with the cities of San Pablo and Hercules. For other revenues, that includes our fines, interest and rental income, and other miscellaneous revenues. Those fluctuate, but are based on historical trends. And lastly, transfers in are based on our OPEB and pension cost, and we withdraw a portion of funds from the trust to help offset those costs and stabilize the budget. Next slide. Looking at our key expenditure assumptions, salaries and wages, we did build in a 3% across the board general salary increase for all staff, and that's just based on the current contracts. It is based on the current staffing level, so we did not assume any new staff. For PERS benefits, it's based on the CalPERS valuation report that is provided to the city each year, along with a long-term planning tool that PERS does make available for long-term planning. For all other benefits, that includes medical, dental, vision, workers' compensation, just as examples. Those are based on historical trends. We also will get information from the HR department on where they're seeing the trend going when it comes to medical rates, for example. For professional and administrative services, those are primarily based on contracts with ConFire and also with the county library and animal control services. They have cost escalators built into those contracts, and we use those factors to build this budget. For professional services outside of these contracts, which includes things like building maintenance, we consider historical trends and also build-in cost inflation. For other operating, which is primarily utilities, it's based on historical trends as well, and we also build in cost inflation, and we also consider our current utility rates, such as those that are published by PG&E. Next slide. Continuing with the expenditure assumptions for materials and supplies, interdepartmental charges, and asset capital outlay, we also consider historical trends and use cost inflators such as CPI to increase those as the growth factors. For debt service, it's based on our long-term debt obligation schedule. And again, we just have one outstanding debt, 2006 POBs. And then for transfers out, these are based on the operating subsidies that are provided to the Community Services Department, Community Development, and Pinole Community Television. There's also a flat contribution to the Equipment Replacement Fund in the amount of $150,000 that we transfer over to in an effort to build up funds to replace vehicles and equipment as needed. Next slide. So, sorry, this is pretty small, as it does cover 20 years, and it is included in the packet. This is the preliminary long-term financial forecast for the general fund based on the assumptions that were outlined. I have a dotted line there at the fifth year of the forecast, just because as you start to look out further, it becomes highly speculative. However, it's always good to have a longer term forecast, because there are certain factors that we can build in and foresee how they'll impact us, such as the pension costs. Pension, or CalPERS is one of those agencies that provides long-term planning tools, and we've built those in. But if we're just looking at our budget on an annual basis overall, I would just emphasize that we focus on the first 5 years of this forecast. So if we look at the fiscal year, looking at the current fiscal year, which is the first column, so 2025-26, we see that we adopted, or the City Council adopted, a structurally balanced budget. For fiscal year 2026-27, based on the assumptions listed, we are projecting a shortfall of $718,000. Again, this is based on the finance department making these assumptions and putting together this for the citywide budget. However, departments have not started entering their budgets. They'll start that on Monday. And once those budgets are entered, we'll have a clearer picture of where we are. And then we will measure that up against what we've forecasted to see how close we've gotten to the forecast. A few things that I'd also like to point out here is that our most expensive areas of the budget includes our salaries and benefits, and in the third place is professional services. However, most of our professional services are also non-discretionary, meaning that the majority of that is our fire services contract, the contracts that we have with the county for animal and library services, which I don't believe is a choice or an opt-out. We don't have opt-out options there. And everything else that is in there, it's really things that, for instance, our building maintenance is also included in professional services, and that's one area that we do contract out for the maintenance of the buildings, and so that's included there as well. For other areas, if we look at our other operating expenses, those are utilities, so we can't make reductions there. Those are things we have to pay. If we look at our materials and supplies, that's about $180,000. That's for our regular janitorial supplies, safety supplies, things and such. If we're looking at capital asset or capital outlay, that is not our major capital improvement projects. That's our regular operating tools that we need to operate. So our computers, our laptops, our workspaces is included in that. And so I bring up those points to emphasize that there's a very small margin of discretionary budget funds when we're looking at the general fund budget. everything is pretty much locked into what I would call discretion or non-discretionary areas that we have to pay unless we make some other organizational changes. And as I mentioned earlier, we are seeing growth in our base revenues. However, they're just far outpaced by the growth in our expenditures. And so we have to look at both sides of the equation. We can, continue to look at increasing revenue. We also have to look at ways to reduce expenditures in order to prepare fiscally sustainable budgets over the long term. That is where we are.
Just a quick question on that, Director. Actually, I have a few questions.
Okay.
So most people who follow budgets, I'm sure you are going to say, yeah, you either need to increase revenue or decrease expenses. But I'm also imagining, right, there's more to the story. I mean, when you're laying out even the increases in expenses, surprise, surprise, it's usually the pension.
Yes.
Fund, right, which we're talking about.
Yes.
It's not, because every expense is not equal. So of course, we'll talk about that probably at the next Finance Committee meeting, but I was just wondering about two things. You had said one of our expenses is the animal services agreement.
Yes.
And you also connected that to the library. Are those intertwined now, those agreements?
They are not. I just
Okay.
mentioned them together because they're through the county.
Okay, fantastic.
county services.
So, of course, with the assumptions that your team is making here, my question comes back to the closure of the Pinole Library for this year. Our library is going to be closed most of the fiscal year of 2026, 2027.
Okay.
So, where does our contract with that? I thought that I don't know where that contract is. So, what does our contract look like, or what are the assumptions here in this budget? Because that's a part of our baseline budget, right?
Good point. And I did not consider that. I don't know
Okay.
if
That's a good
Director
thing.
Dwyer's here. That's good.
That's
right,
a good
exactly.
thing. Yeah,
So
yeah.
there'll be some, and
Yeah.
there'll be adjustments and refinement.
Yeah.
This is just a way to start informing and kicking off the budget process.
Okay,
Yeah.
fantastic. I'd love to understand that number. The last number I
Yes.
saw was 250 per year, 250K per year is
For a
what
library, yes, that's
we pay for. Obviously, that is, that
Yeah.
assumption or where we're at with that would be a considerable expense slash revenue consideration. And the animal services agreement, I'm assuming, is integrated into here
it is.
as an assumption? Okay.
Yes.
Gotcha. I had one more question, but I completely forgot about it. I'll just hold off for now, but that was the main question, was around the library agreement.
Okay.
So I guess my question is related a little bit to when we're looking at the expenditures, we mentioned that we contract some work out, right? And I guess as far as the contracts go, we don't have those percentages. Is how much are we actually contracting? I think, or do we have that?
We can pull that number. Yes.
Because I'm looking at, the $31 million we're spending on expenditures and trying to understand, okay, how much of that and we talked about it earlier, where that line is that you don't want to dip below.
Yeah.
Right? And what you're saying is that line is very high compared to what we actually have coming in.
Yes.
And I think that we've increased revenue,
Yes,
but
we
expenditures increase that. So I'm trying to understand, I guess maybe that's something that you can come back with is where are those lines and what can we spread out over time? I'm just, and I mean, the glaring one is 12.7 million in the police department. That's double our highest expenditure, which is the fire department, or almost double the expenditure of the fire department. Or our general government. And then I think the third is the public works department. Now, does this include positions that are vacant?
Yes.
Okay. And are there any vacant positions in the police department? So we do have some?
Yes.
Okay.
Mayor, what did you mean by that question? I'm sorry, just so I'm understanding. When you're saying, does this include?
So I know that there was a law that came around where the vacancies have to be reported, right? And if we're carrying vacancies year on year, that's additional budget that's in here that's not filled. And the question becomes, okay, well, what happens to that money? And then
gotcha.
the question becomes, how much of that is used to balance everything? I think the hardest part for me is that, I know that we talked about, roads, we talked about several of the contracts we have, but question becomes, how is the budget reflective of that direction, right? That I think council had given at some point. So, I mean, that question's gonna come up on the dais when we start to review this is,
Yes.
well, how much work are we actually getting done? How many vacancies are we lacking? Like I saw in the public works element, the maintenance worker for concrete and masonry. That's grinding concrete, that's crack sealing, that's all the things that we've been talking about. However, it's one of these things that's being delivered now, but council, and I guess this is the disconnect, is like, I know council had talked about prioritizing that with the funding that came in for Measure I. And so what I'm trying to understand is where that balance is, how much of those vacancies are out there, what is that dollar amount, and what is council's role in that? I mean, can we say, hey, maybe we need to focus here instead of there? And then what does that adjustment look like? And it's just that we keep saving, it feels like we keep, and I mean, this is, I say we, but really it's my perspective and just what I see, right? I know that there's a lot more to it, but we save money or we plan for money and then all of a sudden we're balanced and can't spend, and that line jumps to the very top and you have this much discretionary to talk about.
Yep.
And constituents don't get that part.
Yeah.
That's number one, or they're starting to get it. I know I'm getting calls as to why aren't we seeing things moving? And I know they are. It's just, how do we get that out there?
Yes.
When I look at this budget, it's kind of like, are they? You know, the question becomes, are they, and how, by how much? And so I just want to make sure that we have this in this discussion in the committee, only because there's going to be those questions as to how do we, you know, for a 6-month period, can we do a surge in one area and then a surge in the next, which kind of would be, you know, really balancing everything on a knife's edge. But is it possible? I mean, is it possible to do a surge in some areas and then pull back and then another surge in another? Because as we said, a lot of this funding is cyclical, and it just feels like we balance and then go into saying, yeah, we balance, but it's like, wait a minute, there were a lot of things that I know I asked for, I know that the council asked for that didn't get done, and then we're waiting to the next year to project out. I want to say about 4 years ago, we had the capital plan and where everything was in the capital plan and having that discussion. And then we're starting to see, okay, hey, this is in design, this is in, but it took a long time to get to that point. So I think for me, I really want us to focus on what those the spend downs are. I mentioned the S curve, but it's like when we spend, right? And how do we catch up and then balance at the end of the year, and really where that lands. I know we're looking at forecasting, but it'd be interesting to see historically where we were. And I know these forecasts are traditionally what happened, but are based on what happened.
Yes.
But really trying to understand what those S curves look like when what do we actually spend, and how do we actually spend it, and what that carryover looks like. Yeah, and I mean, just to be honest, I know we're losing money in certain areas, but there's the community benefit, and I think it's up to this council to truly, and the public to really truly weigh that.
Yes.
So those are my thoughts on looking at this chart.
I just wanted to make one comment regarding the vacancies. That doesn't always result in savings because overtime typically increases, especially in the police department, where most of our vacancies are. So that it usually balances out. It doesn't end with because there are vacancies that we end with a lot of savings there.
I guess what I'm saying is that if there is a plan to fill those vacancies and it's a 6-month plan, we're not going to incur costs until six months, right? So there's a cushion of money there, right?
Well, to Director Guillory's point, if we're talking about police vacancies, officers, then yes, it will take some time to fill a vacancy, and we may have a plan whether that individual would go through the police academy or field training before they are a solo operating officer. But in the meantime, to meet our minimum staffing requirements, we do have to staff it with overtime. So that cost savings of that vacancy doesn't exist or doesn't fully exist during that period where the position is actually vacant because we're having to spend the overtime to fill it with officers.
What about retirees, like the 960s? Have we thought about, I mean, because I understand completely, someone gets injured, right? And this goes for any department. Someone gets injured, they're on, or family medical leave, or, for whatever reason, they're off work. There's this question of, okay, well, I got to fill this gap. And then I think the overtime overlap is one way to do it. Another way to do it would be to hire, a retiree for or CalPERS retiree, kind of like what we're doing with the city manager, right? That would slide in, be able to patrol to some degree. But I'm just wondering if that's an option versus the overtime, which we'd be paying the time and a half, sometimes double time, right? I mean, there's other options I think that are out there. I don't know if they've been explored or not. But
Yes, for our dispatch center, we do have a 960 dispatcher who does exactly what you're referring to. That helps and fills in some of those vacant shifts.
Yeah, and I'm not saying it's a solution. Recruitment and retention has been a big issue for years. The question becomes, okay, in a small city like Pinole, where does that balance come out? And I know that public safety, we're talking about public safety, but it's across the board. Like, how do we balance that? And I mean, if anybody asks, well, how much does safety cost? Again, I say it from the dais a couple times. It's like, it's priceless. Like my safety, my kids, it's priceless. I'll pay anything, right? But there is a point where we're on a fixed budget where, well, how much is it going to cost, right? And I think that, not having somebody on the street, putting another officer in a situation where they're the only one out there, that's not ideal either. And how does that get balanced across the board? Not an easy answer, but I do know that we have a fixed $12.7 million, and we have to figure out how to balance that throughout. What I was mentioning is if there was a 960 in their savings, how is that balanced right now? I mean, because that 960 would only be taking 6 months of the current salary. Is it 6 months of a reduced salary? How does that work? Is it a 1-to-1? Maybe that solution would only be saving the overtime.
They are taking the current salary, most likely a top step based on level of experience.
I see.
But not with the benefits. It's not a fully benefited position. It's just a salary only.
Okay, so there is some savings plus the half time for double 1.5 times for overtime.
Yes, correct.
Okay, and I mean I know this is a committee and we're asking very specific questions, but just trying to come up with other, like, if there are other solutions and how do we balance that across. I know the team is eventually, and I've seen this before, is when you work that much overtime, then that person gets injured, and it's kind of an exponential, and it's not due to a person saying, "Oh, I'm hurt." No, it's the overload, right?
Yes.
And then you're on this spiral downward. And I just want to make sure we don't get caught in that, and we have some levers to pull.
And if I may, just one other consideration about 960 officers, specifically for sworn officer positions, is they have to maintain the post-required level of training as well. So there is that expense on the department to make sure they maintain that training. So it just is an offset of costs.
Right. I'm just wondering if there's a way to kind of bridge, and if there is a bridge, what that savings looks like for some of the vacancies across departments, and if there was a way to shift for the 6 months and help some of the other departments out and then shift back. I'm not sure if that's even possible, but just something to look at as far as strategies go. The other thing that I was looking at was, how much we're spending in contracts. I think we really got to take a hard look at what in-house work we can and can't do. Sometimes there's $150,000 contract that we've been spending for the last 5 years, when that person could have came in-house and done it for half that, or could come in and do it for the 100,000, but can do it in a shorter amount of time. So I'm just trying to figure out if there are those options out there. But a lot of times you can see that in the burn, in that curve, like where those spikes happen. That way you're focusing, okay, wait, in this particular area, I know for engineering, a lot of times it's rainy season. We get hit and the cost burn goes up. So it's kind of like, well, is there a surge there? And what is that surge? If it's overtime, then maybe supplemental staff could help during that season. But I'm just kind of throwing things out as to what operationally we could try to do to curb some of this, because next year we're $718,000 in the hole, right? So anything we could do now to help for the next 2 years would be helpful.
I did have a quick question, but I see Director Guillory too. I had a different question. Were you referring?
Yes, if I may add some information with regards to Public Works. And I'm not saying that by the end of the fiscal year we will have no salary saving, because this is going to depend on how much effort and expenses we will have. But given, for example, the limited resources and the needed type of expertise within the engineering division, we used consultants to help us with grant applications. Currently, I'm using a consultant to prepare the signing and striping plan and the request for bid documents that I need to publish next month for the pavement rehabilitation project. We're working with a consultant to start the design for the Tenant Avenue sewer outfall line. These are elements that we cannot currently do in-house. And to get the work moving, my only option currently is to retain consultants using the salary savings. With regards to the position that's mentioned about the maintenance worker with concrete type and knowledge, we currently have a contract out for like sidewalk shaving and minor repairs that would be eliminated if we were to hire a maintenance worker with that type of expertise. Because we have the machine, we can do the work if we have the right person to do the work. In addition to other type like curb ramps, like minor types of repairs. And this maintenance worker would also be available to do other functions. He's not going to solely do concrete work. He would be able to help with other facilities repairs and improvements and parks work. So
I before you ask your question, Mayor Pro Tem, so that's kind of where I was going with is that it's helpful to know that, okay, we've been hiring consultants. Question is if you've been hiring $300,000 a year, and I'm making a number up, in consultants for the last 3 years, it might make sense to say, okay, can we take that 300, dramatically reduce the consultant need, and then push towards hiring 2 people to perform that work? Or and I don't know if that analysis has been done or being done in the past, but I think it's taking that hard look, because you mentioned the concrete that you've been doing, and in that table, hold on, got to go back a few pages. It'd be helpful to know the 110 estimated costs. In my mind, and I know this is just my mind, but in the past, that money and savings for that contract just goes away and gets lumped in the general fund, and now becomes 700. That 700,000 deficit goes away that much more sometimes, or it's filling something else. But the return to source would be that you would be getting an estimated revenue or savings of X amount in the concrete consultant. That's not shown in this, but probably doesn't have that number yet. But what I'm getting at is that's extremely helpful, I think, for council to see, okay, well, wait a minute, if we go this way, there is a net savings or I mean, net revenue sometimes. I mean, sometimes the consultants are more expensive than if we were to just have a plan to do it on our own. What I'm hoping is 220,000. We could say, oh, wow, we can do 2 people. But I know that this type of work never ends. It's constant. You're going to be shaving down concrete cracks. You're going to be sealing cracks in the road. You're going to be filling and it will never end. It gets better, but it will never stop. It's always going to be something that's happening. So I'm just trying to understand if it's possible to try to balance that for the council and bringing that back. How we show it, I think you got to look at I think consolidating this down so it's digestible, I think is going to be the hardest part. But yeah, that history is going to tell us this is what we've been doing, and then we make a business decision to change that. But it has to be clear. The goals have to be, set. The work plans have to be established, and then we execute accordingly. So I think that exercise would be extremely beneficial across all departments. I mean, I think it's important. Sorry, I know I'm talking too long, but okay, get back to next steps.
I was just going to ask one quick question about, so I know this is a simulator process, so it may change the next time we see it, but I was just wondering to what extent the assumptions were made. So the solid waste contract that we just approved, is that assumed in the assumption of this?
No, not, this is just general fund,
Okay,
So
and
it-
because that's a particular enterprise fund separate, that's
a
not.
special revenue fund.
Special number,
Yes.
okay.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you. That clears that question. I'm glad to ask. And then to what extent would the, recently the city released the real estate transparency dashboard, which has generated a lot of conversations locally. To what extent are real estate dealings integrated into the assumptions?
They are not.
Okay. If we have a current disposition of a property, would that be considered into this assumption?
It's a one-time funding
what I'm
source.
asking,
So yes, it would go into the general fund, basically into an assigned fund balance, and you could assign it for something, but it would need to be used for a one-time.
Right, but that's not.
It's not
That
built
means
in
it
here.
wouldn't be assumed here.
Right.
Okay, I just wanted
This
to
is
make
just
sure to
baseline.
understand how that baseline
Yep.
is really generated, because, so that means moving forward, any sale of property is not in the baseline.
It's not.
Okay, that would
It's
make
always a one-time transaction. Yeah,
Thank you, Director Guillory.
you're welcome.
All right.
Okay. So let's talk next steps. So we asked for direction from the Finance Subcommittee. If we have not scheduled a meeting for March, so we would like to know if there's direction to hold a Finance Subcommittee meeting in March, and what you would like us to address during that meeting, and then any other direction that you may have for us on the items tonight.
So I'm in favor of a meeting in March if we could fit it in to everything that we're doing. Will the directors have a better understanding of the items that were presented here? I guess, will they have a better understanding of budget and I know this is a big jump, but to go back a little bit in previous years to understand the spending and make kind of recommendations, or would that probably be April?
So, yes, so we do have a recommendation for, I know we discussed during the first Finance Subcommittee meeting, having department presentations where they present their proposed budgets and operational plans for the year. And we could also address some of these other items that we discussed tonight.
Okay.
And we thought that should probably, those department presentations should probably occur in a special city council meeting with the full council
Okay.
sometime in April. So we were recommending polling the full city council for a special meeting.
Okay, that sounds good. I'm in favor of that. I don't know.
So what, just generally in terms of process, the March meeting would consist of what type of items? Just to, I mean, I don't mind
So
meeting, I
that's-
just want to
Yeah,
preserve everybody's
that's
time.
what staff would need direction,
Okay, 'cause-
direction on, if there's anything you'd like us to bring back, or if the April meeting would be adequate for the responses.
I'm feeling like the April meeting is adequate, but I also don't, so the last time we talked about this, we were saying monthly,
Yes.
mostly for the presentations of those departments, which I assume wouldn't have been an all in one day.
Right.
The staff recommendation around the city council meeting, special meeting, I hear that as every department in one meeting. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, which is all the, we just
That would
went through
just be
this.
that item, just to focus on
Okay.
budget and the department presentations.
And that would be basically all of these items that have been already
That would
discussed with
be-
a little bit more detail?
Yes,
Okay.
and the department heads would present those items and be able to provide more information.
Solid, okay.
Is it possible to try to make that uniform? What I mean by that is that the questions and content that we brought up today, if it was in the same format,
Yes.
so that things are comparable across each
Yeah,
department.
absolutely.
I think that would be helpful.
Mm-hmm.
I think to me, and we can talk offline, but I'd really like to see those spend curves, because I think that's gonna really tell, okay, when is our revenue coming in? What are the ebbs and flows of Pinole? I mean, I have my intuition, my research, but figuring out how we can communicate that and where that lands, it might be too much to show on a PowerPoint, though. Like, I mean, for anybody to digest, but I think the information is huge once it's explained. So I don't know if I mean, to me, I like the monthly meeting. I think this meeting was great. 5 o'clock to 7. Okay, sorry, that was 2 hours. Didn't anticipate that, but I think we got a lot out of it.
Yes.
These meetings are typically 2 hours.
No, I get it.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, like, I think that, wow, this was a really good session where we're able to talk about, okay, what do these the ins and outs of the funding
Yeah.
mean, and looking at these projections. I'm just trying to think, how do we further this discussion? How do we further this discussion? I'd like to see the history. And I think that would be huge to have for public and for the council, but
No. I was thinking about that. I don't know if that's for the March meeting, but I have been, one of the thoughts of my mind right now, given the questions I was asking also, is to what extent are each department's budgets increasing as well, the percentages over time, like prior to, of course I can compare 2020, but after, because I've been here. But to be honest with you, I haven't compared 2020 to 2021, 2022, 2023. But I'm just thinking about, again, if I am encouraging as a council member staff to look into shared service agreements, that would make, I would assume that staff is looking towards the historical expenses of their departments to decide what would be actually useful to share with a different agency. So I would love to see that, but I also don't know if that's necessary to see in March. I want to give staff enough time to give that, but that historical data piece is definitely critical, because we keep looking to the future. And we also do have a lot of new staff members. And so I also feel like sometimes I get worried that institutional knowledge, that it's weird to say I have institutional knowledge, but just any institutional knowledge is not reshared. So I'm wondering about those pieces, and I feel like the historical data really helps,
Okay.
but I don't want to create another process. I just want to ensure that that data is useful in decision making around these opportunities and threats. And so it's really an ask to Director Guillory, and also other directors, as to what historical data is being used that informs these decisions. And that's an open-ended question to create an answer to, but it would be helpful for me to see as a council member in making decisions moving forward. And I'm just assuming that's something that would be helpful for directors.
yeah, I'm in the same boat. I'm just thinking of fire. Fire was up and down. Like, when I looked at that one, it was up and down as far as the spending, and it was erratic. It wasn't all in one season. But once we got the contract, it went up and then stabilized with an increase
Over time.
over time, right? But it was calculated. You could plan on it. it's a contract. And I'm trying to figure out where else within these budgets, you're only gonna know that, especially if you're a 1 year, 2 year director in a new place, you're only gonna know that by looking at how you were spending over the past, or how your department was spending over the past few years. I think sometimes somebody might go strictly off their experience and say, okay, we have to organize everything this way, when and then there's the added cost associated with that. I'm just wondering if we can see that, but I would imagine that that's enough direction to do that for the meeting.
For the April meeting.
Yeah, for April. I'm just wondering if it's, I would just ask that staff take that perspective. And then for the April meeting, that way there can be very clear trends that we could see, okay, well, maybe this is what I can cut if we were to do X. And if those business decisions need to be made, then I guess from council, via budget, right? We can say, yeah, let's allocate that money and realize some of the benefits that we've been calling on call versus a stable program that can be funded. And then that line can, although high, may drop a little bit and stay that way and buy ourselves a few more years and some successes. So
And Director Guillory, am I correct by assuming that by that point in April, we would also receive polling data from the city?
You'll have that in March.
We'll have that by that point. So yeah, it feels like there's a lot of information that would be given to us by
Yes.
April. I'm okay with having a meeting, but Mayor,
no, I'm thinking April. Let's give staff time to pull this together. I think we've given a lot of content to digest and go back to. I would just say that if we can use those perspectives, and then at the same time, when we're comparing, we try to do an apples to apples comparison. Now, the departments are not apples to apples, but if the data is presented that way, I think we might find some of those nuances that can be expressed to the public and to the council, where those nuances, like the chief mentioned, a vehicle running 24 hours is different. Like the engine runtime is a lot more than the mileage. So you might have low mileage, but a car that you can no longer put into service and shorten the life cycle. That's nuanced and would only be a professional that knows that, right? So maybe as those comparisons come up, we could see those costs and then take note of those as we're moving forward. Okay.
thank you.
All right. Treasurer Swearingen, are you with us?
Yeah, I'm here.
Did you have any comments?
A couple. I think we better take a long look at where our investments are going, because the investment portfolio is steady and it's conservative and it works. And I wouldn't fool with that, and I wouldn't get artificial intelligence involved in that, because right now artificial intelligence versus electrification all over the United States. And I don't know what's going to happen there, but I think I'd stay away from that one as far as introducing that as an investment. That was brought up earlier in the meeting. As far as the meeting in March, I'm not sure that's absolutely necessary. I think we've covered all the basics here. I think we need one more meeting to get the recommendations from the Finance Committee to the City Council, and then it'll be up to the City Council. And I think the City Council is going to have to take more than one meeting to approve the budget.
No, that's a good point. That's a good point. Okay. All right. Let's see. So we got through 4A and 4B. I think you just needed the motion and second we got on 4A and the vote.
Mayor,
and
we
then,
do have a online public comment.
oh, public comment for B. Absolutely. Thank you.
Yes, Raphael Menace.
Go ahead, Raphael.
Okay, sorry. I unmuted and then it said I got muted immediately afterwards. So can you hear me?
Yeah, we got you.
Okay, great. So one thing I wanted to highlight, because I was digging back through some of the older budget files, was the April 30th, 2024 special budget meeting had a presentation by Baker Tilly Management Partners going into various different budget scenarios going from 2024 forward. And I think looking over the strategies that they show in that document, so from about page 14 of 156 of that document down to page
There are no more public comment.
I'm not done commenting yet, my apologies, to page 27. So it looks like right now we're basically on budget scenario number 4's path. And that one was basically introduce a third local sales tax. And then it has basically massive cuts starting in financial year 2030-31, like $3.2 million in that year, and going up from there between 3.1 and 7.4 million. So basically it's saying, instead of doing like, I think the initial plan for budget strategies 1 and 2 was more 500,000 a year, so slower cuts before then. But as far as I can tell, we've basically been close to status quo the past few years. There were some cuts in the last year's budget, but I wanted to highlight for folks that budget scenario 4 says that if we keep going down that path, we don't have any other revenue measures other than the sales tax measure that passed. We don't have any major budget cuts. We just continue going steady state. Once we hit fiscal year 29-30, we start needing to have basically 10% across the board cuts escalating from there. So I just wanted to remind people that, you know, we have looked at this in the past. We're currently going down one particular strategy path that looks like, and if we continue down that path, this is what it expected is going to need to happen. It might not be 100% accurate because there've been some changes at the federal level, for example, with tariffs and the Medicare and Medicaid cuts, with the so-called Big Beautiful Bill leading to increased healthcare costs and so on. Basically, that's a lot of what caused the cost escalations, I suspect. But I think that for the April meeting, it would be a good idea for staff to attach basically the April 30th, 2024 special budget workshop, the Baker Tilly presentation there, and maybe any updates that they have to sort of cross-reference between what it was then and what it has been. Thank you.
Thank you, Speaker. Okay, do we have any other public speakers?
There are no more public speakers.
Okay, so we'll move on to item 5. There's no action requested, and we'll move on to item 5, adjournment. All right.
Correct.
Oh, did I miss something? Did Roxanne? Okay, awesome.
No, I was saying correct.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Roxanne.